D&D players of Reddit, what's the most awesome or evil thing you've ever accomplished?
Wingardium Leviosa.
This was way back in college. We were a low-level party, most of us were new to the game, and we were attacked by ogres. The battle went on forever, but things were looking grim for us once the cleric went down. A few rounds later and the ogres were dead, but everyone but one character was down. I was playing this character for a guy who ended up leaving for an emergency. He had no healing magic. After everyone was bandaged, I looked to the nearby cave for shelter. We realized there were likely ogre children in there. Nobody could figure out how to tell if anyone was still in there, and how to get them out if they were. I had 2 hit points, and any real fighting would likely end the whole adventure. I told the DM that I cut off the head of one of the dead female ogres, rolled it in like a bowling ball, and braced myself at the mouth of the cave for backstabbing bonuses. They ran
Wingardium Leviosa.
out screaming, and were killed quickly. The DM looked at me chuckling as others, new to the game, were shocked by this. "You are a cold motherfucker," he said.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I'll try to keep this short. We were a low-level party. I was playing a rogue, David was playing a warlock, and Michael was a fighter. The quest was to get a spellbook from a wizard's tower. We broke in and the fighter failed the stealth check. The warlock was killed by magical rugs that smothered him. David was pretty upset because it was our first session, so he and the DM stepped outside for a few minutes after combat. When they came in, the DM said that the wizard was walking downstairs. I hid around the corner and used sneak attack to hit him for like 30 points of damage. Insta-kill. Turns out, while outside, the DM said that David could play the wizard as his character had just died. Until I killed him. Whoops. Edit, spelling.
Wingardium Leviosa.
One of my party members bought an elephant, but we needed to travel by boat and needed to sell it. Elephants weren't exactly common in the city we were in, but they also weren't in demand. So I, barred with disguise self and actor feat, went to the local stable posing as a noble's servant desperately looking for an elephant for his master's son's birthday. I told him money was no object. He told us that he heard of an elephant in another city, so I told him that I would go there, but would be in town for a few days while arranging travel. A couple of days later, we had the owner of the elephant go to the stable looking to sell. The stable master saw the opportunity for profit and tried to buy at cost. I was in another disguise, pretending to be someone who had heard of the noble's search, and started a bidding war with the stable master. Once the price reached 500, I told him that I would
Wingardium Leviosa.
buy it for that price, but I would need a day to gather the money. Stablemaster offered to buy it for 480 right now, and he agreed. And then we got on the boat and left. Stablemaster later hired some mercenaries to try to track us down when he figured out he'd been swindled, but I used another disguise self to make them think they were following the wrong group.
Wingardium Leviosa.
A few years ago, I played in a Pathfinder campaign as a lawful good sorcerer with a long story arc in which I fully intended he would fall into evil. I use his bloodline, Infernal? Can't remember the name, as the basis for this. I played for several months, becoming a little more evil and unpredictable every session, until I had to quit the game due to some other commitments. The GM and I agreed that my character suddenly just vanished without a word to the rest of the party, under suspicious circumstances. Several months later they were winding up the campaign, and the GM invited me back to play in the final session. They were up against an evil spellcaster who was terrorizing the frontier area they were trying to settle/civilize. GM didn't tell the other players I was coming back, he had them never seen before. NPC lure them into a trap, while I waited outside the room. On
Wingardium Leviosa.
His signal, I strolled casually into the room, in character, and revealed myself as the bad guy they'd been hunting. And then proceeded to try to murder the shit out of them. It almost worked, too. But they got in a couple opportune crits and, well, good prevailed in the end. Too bad, really.
Wingardium Leviosa.
The last time I played as a character, I played an Eladrin wizard who was given a robe of magic missiles, much like the robe of stars, by our DM. By expending one of the 7 beads attached to the robe, I could cast the magic missile spell at 9th level. Shortly after this, the other players and I entered an arena in which we all faced off against each other. It was just for fun. We wouldn't die from our wounds, and once we left, any magic we exhausted would be returned to us. Everyone kept attacking me because they felt, with my robe, I was the biggest threat. And they were right. Once I finally got the chance to attack, I expended all the beads on my robe. With some damage modifiers I was using combined with the force of the missiles, I obliterated the arena and everyone in it. I won the battle.
Wingardium Leviosa.
His grandfathers had captured and imprisoned a devil inside a ring and hid it away in their mansion. He snuck into this secret chamber and found the hidden ring. He told the devil that he would free him if the devil would make him a great and powerful mage. The devil agrees and instructs him to wear the ring. The moment the ring slips on his finger, the devil fully possesses Draylin. Later, when one of the characters in the party confronts me because it is revealed who and what I am, the devil, who only refers to himself as Draylin, responds, "I promised to make him a powerful mage and I have done so." He knew the price, but not what it would cost him. I told the DM about this ahead of time, but my character was actually a devil possessing a half-elf. I went through majority of the campaign pretending to be a mortal. The rest of the party eventually began questioning why I could speak Infernal, could help them navigate through hell, and why I never disclosed my patron as a warlock. The patron was myself. Even though I was lawful evil, I never betrayed or harmed my party. I saw them as meat shield assets that could ensure I enjoyed a long sinful, blasphemous vacation on the material plane, indulging in every type of vice and committing every religious taboo under the sun. All is flesh. The backstory was there was a half-elf named Draylin who was born into a very prestigious wizarding family. However, despite years of study, he could barely cast the most elementary of spells. One day while studying, he found documents on how one of
Wingardium Leviosa.
had a rogue in our party. Every person we met and needed something from kept dying. Everywhere we went, NPCs dropped like flies. DM kept having us roll at random times, so we knew something was up. Turned out finally the rolls were to see if any of us noticed the rogue poisoning everyone. I mean everyone. He had worked out a signal with the DM for when he wanted to kill someone, and he got away with it forever. We didn't realize his rolls were for if the poison worked, ours were for if we noticed. He finally rolled a 1, the NPC noticed what he was doing, and the plot was exposed. Turned out he was a spy working for the main bad NPC. When we asked why he didn't just try to kill us and not just those helping us, he said, "What makes you think I haven't tried? Lol."
Wingardium Leviosa.
The first major campaign I played in was the one where Tiamat was gonna rise up. I played an incredibly awkward Kenku Necromancer / Rogue level 2 Rogue / level 18 Wizard, named Scraps. Scraps started off the campaign wanting 3 things. To get the girl he has loved all his life, the respect of his mentor, and wings. He got all 3 and so much more. He only had to die twice, and endure 50 years of torture in one of the hells. Even though he got all of these things, his story doesn't end happily. You see, his mentor was the father of the girl he loved, and was also a powerful necromancer. When his mentor died, He was left the secret of how to become a lich out of a sense of love and duty. Along with tens of thousands of years worth of notes from his mentor, along with a bunch of other amazing things. He had been tasked with protecting his love and her family until they passed. The thing
Wingardium Leviosa.
is, Kenku lived much shorter lives than gnomes, so he had to become a lich to protect them for their lives. After his wife died, he was never the same. He never stopped grieving her, but lived on to protect his home, his city, and every generation of his family. I could talk about this guy for hours. I spent a year and a half pouring my entire being into Scraps, and he had all of his dreams come true. I cried when everything ended. If anyone wants to hear me ramble more about Scraps and his adventures and whatnot, I'm glad to answer any questions.
Wingardium Leviosa.
The badass Super King ruler vampire of the land walks in and starts kicking my party mates around like dolls. My turn comes up, and instead of attacking, my gnome rogue takes a knee and pledges an undying allegiance to the vampire cause. I fail a persuasion check, and he cuts my head off. We were going to wipe anyway. I had to give it a shot.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Plunged into chaos. We ended up throwing the entire Covenant into the chasm after a long, 3-session, 16-hour battle with them. Doing so altered reality to a supercritical state which weakened the god who created the chasm. He materialized to confront us, and after defeating most of the PCs in our party, I managed to bull rush him, and tackle him into the pit. Because I successfully grappled him, he went down the chasm under me. Which blinked him from existence, and thus blinked the chasm from existence, as well as he had never made the chasm in the first place. Our PCs awoke in total confusion. My friends and I played a campaign that lasted for 3 years. We had a really good DM and for the most part lots of great PCs. It could be made into a movie. I was playing as a human paladin named Ramian. I was one of the few played who managed to keep my character the whole campaign, so he ended up being level 20 by the last session. Our enemies we were fighting were pretty much the worst of the worst. They were an evil covenant called the Chasmites, of they worshipped a giant hole they called the Chasm of Neverbin. An evil god had told them that things thrown into the pit no longer existed, nor had they ever existed. So they kidnapped people they didn't like and threw them in. Doing so made whatever or whoever their victims were erased from history. Not even the Covenant remember them. The more they deleted from history, the more voids they created in time, and the more the planes.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I think one of my favorite moments was what I've come to call the Rat Swarm Meat Grinder story. We were a relatively high-ish level party, low teens or so, and were exploring a dungeon. I forget exactly what class I was playing, it was out of one of the weird side books, Gotta Love 3.5e, having hundreds of those, but it was a sort of ranger/rogue hybrid, so I was generally leading the pack. We hit the end of a corridor and opened the door, revealing a massive dire rat swarm. The intent of the encounter would be us fighting it off while it chased us back down the corridor we'd come from, lest we be entirely, well, swarmed. I should take a moment here to explain a quirk of basically every character I play. I make a point to always buy a small bag of holding and fill it with caltrops. It's relatively cheap and infinitely useful to have on hand in those kind of quantities. I
Wingardium Leviosa.
instantly declare I want to roll a reflex save to chuck my bag of holding into the room and shut the door, which the DM has me do 2 rolls for. Nailed the roll for chucking the bag, and hit a 20 on the door shut part of the action. My argument being that the swarm is a constantly moving entity, so the caltrops were basically going to turn that room into a giant meat grinder, since the swarm was always shifting or moving and would always be taking damage from the caltrops. We avoided a pretty major encounter in the dungeon with full credit. Though opening the door still resulted in my character basically getting bathed in a mix of ground-up rats and caltrops, since we still had to move forward in the dungeon. Less elaborate but still awesome was the time I nailed a triple crit on a boss during an attack of opportunity. While blind.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Oh, I got a succubus story too. Our axe-wielding dwarven fighter was seduced by a succubus after complaining about how he hadn't seen a woman in months. My female monk gave him an earful for that. Anyways, he was in his room when the party heard his screams. The party busted in and my monk proceeded to grab the succubus by the hair and used that opportunity to hammer in any loose nails to the floorboards with her skull. Unfortunately, she teleported out before we could finish her off, but we caught up with her later that session.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Improvised song consisting of the lyrics, "Please don't die." Later in that session, we were at a bar, and there was a fight cage where a bear was fighting a dwarf. The betting odds were something like 100 to 1 for the dwarf to win, so, naturally, we all placed bets on the dwarf. When the fight started, the bear was kicking some dwarf butt, so our warlock used Mage Hand and a successful stealth roll to rig the fight and make us all very rich. My friend was introduced to D&D while he was away for school. His roommate was an avid player who taught him the ropes. When he came back, our friend group got together to start a campaign. So we have a mildly experienced DM and 4 PCs who have no idea what they are doing. However, we are all having a great time, especially me. Since I was playing a bard, I decided to step it up by bringing an instrument to our second session, but the only thing I could find was a finger piano. So fast forward to the middle of our session, we are fighting some zombies and I use bardic inspiration for one of my party members. Now, everyone was expecting me to sing, "It's the way I am," and they know me very well, so I have everyone's eyes on me. I reach into my bag under the table, whip out my finger piano, and play the chord progression to Somewhere Over the Rainbow while singing a totally
Wingardium Leviosa.
This moment is possibly one of my greatest hits from a campaign my friend did years ago. I told my DM that I'm going to jump over the wall of flames. He seriously asked me at least 3 times if I'm sure. I said yes. I roll nat 20. My DM gives me this "are you fucking kidding me" look and says, "You jumped over the infinite high flame wall with no issues." My response: "Oh, I didn't hear the infinite part from that moment and I was calling legs."
Wingardium Leviosa.
Suspense, fast-paced battle music, etc. But once in a while, when the moment's right, and if I know the chords, I'll throw in a pop song reference. This was one such moment. As the player begins his prayer, I softly begin to play the opening riff of AC/DC's Thunderstruck. Thunder Cleric goes on, building in volume and intensity, and ends up delivering an epic fucking speech about how much ass we were going to kick in the Thunder God's name. All the while I stick with that same riff, and everyone in the audience is chanting thunder and stomping their feet along to the beat. I was getting goosebumps. It was fucking metal. We won the battle, of course, but it was the lead up that was the height of the show for all of us. TLDR, friends and I brought the house down with an epic speech set to Thunderstruck in a live D&D show. I'm part of a live improvised D&D stage show in Milwaukee. Not a traditional D&D campaign, but close enough. Each show is its own story, audience chooses names, classes, etc. for each improviser, as well as a location and villain. Our GM/host and I split NPC duties and he narrates/guides, while I improvise background music on keyboard. So this particular show, the audience designates one of our players as a cleric who serves a thunder god. The plot gets to a point where the party is defending a small village against a horde of oncoming enemies, who are due to arrive the next day. So our GM gives everyone a chance to do a training/prep montage, sharpening weapons, preparing potions, etc. Our thunder cleric decides to go a cliff on a nearby mountain to commune with his god. Our GM sets him up. "What is your prayer?" Now, Normally I keep the music atmospheric slow and creepy for.
Wingardium Leviosa.
It wasn't necessarily evil, but we incinerated the mayor of a town, then convinced the rest of his family that I was the mayor and that there was a conspiracy against our family, and that we needed to leave, all so the party could get our friends out of prison and allow a rival family to seize power. Edit, to clarify, this was all quick thinking. None of it was planned. The mayor was being unreasonable, and was abusing his power. Our cleric just kind of snapped and sacred flamed him in his seat. The servants and guards were coming to see what the noise was, so my tiefling Doomstalker Ranger cast disguise self to look like the mayor, then a few lucky rolls and some over-the-top role-playing allowed us to convince the family of the conspiracy that had existed for literally 2 seconds before it all went down.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Apparently, in hobgoblin culture, if you kill a woman's husband, she becomes your wife. Well, one time my party was attacked by a group of hobgoblins. I killed one, not knowing it at the time. I killed one, and it turns out he had a wife who was pregnant. Yeah. I had a set of hobgoblin triplets whose mom died in childbirth. But I turned them into a trio of bards, so it was cool.
Wingardium Leviosa.
In 3/3.5e Planescape game, there was a supposedly evil queen that my group needed to depose in order to get the MacGuffin. The groups started arguing about whether we could trust the quest giver and were leaning toward doing a bunch of recon. The wizard and I, who were neutral instead of good, decided we didn't have time for that. He greater teleported us into the throne room. I used my planar warrior ability to open a portal to Elysium and Sparta kicked the queen through it, then we teleported back out. In case you don't know, Elysium is a good aligned plane where you typically end up living such a good life that you never want to leave. So kind of like a really nice prison. We told the quest giver the mission was accomplished, but lied and said we sent her to the abyss. We had to wait some in-game time for him to get confirmation, but we got our MacGuffin and moved on. This was my
Wingardium Leviosa.
favorite point in my D&D career because it's an accomplishment that could have been a whole campaign for a lower level group, but we were all level 17 and so we handled it appropriately. The GM even appreciated our speedy resolution to it.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I think the most awesome thing our party accomplished was making up for blowing a stealthy entrance into a Yuan-Ti stronghold at the last second, before being MDK'd, and through a series of complicated rolls, convincing first the guards and then the leader of the Yuan-Ti that we were the equivalent of Jehovah's Witnesses. Oh wait, did I say awesome? I was actually the DM. I meant awful. Except I couldn't stop laughing, so I guess I had it coming.
Wingardium Leviosa.
My character became part of the cult of the Dreamer. Prayed to and gave the Dreamer all my dreams. Found the Chain of Hope, which was a sentient artifact that the Dreamer created, fully bonded with the chain, which allowed me to dream, wherein I was able to speak to the entity in the chain and the Dreamer. Eventually freed the Dreamer, though it did cause a tidal wave wherein I killed thousands of people and their city. And finally left the planet with the Dreamer as it was a spelljammer. Side note, that was just my story arc. Each of the players got a pretty awesome story arc and we ended the campaign in a natural way in-game after a year and a half of playing for 2 hours every week. Several of us shed tears when we ended. Our next campaign with that same amazing DM started last Saturday. And the session was intense, with the dice trying to kill us. Seriously, way more intense than
Wingardium Leviosa.
the DM intended. Edit, tidal wave, not today wave.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Oh man, the list is in legion. I've been at this a while. The most recent thing would have to be a petal, Dragonfire Adept. For reference, a petal is a 10-inch tall fairy/pixie thing, that's basically a flower. Flower wings, blossom for hair? It's a tiny flower fae. It looks exactly as harmless as you'd imagine, and their reputation in lore is just as cute. It's a non-combat encounter unless your party is full of giant jerks. You can play as one. I decided I wanted to because my previous character was an orc warlord. Like the orciest orc to ever orc. Multiclass barbarian, orc paragon, orc warlord, war chief, legendary commander. Assemble the motherfucking horde. So this tiny little flower thing is pretty much the opposite of that in all ways. It comes with massive racial bonuses to charisma, so I'm trying to decide what class to pair with this thing. I don't want to do sorcerer cause.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I've got one already. At first I thought druid, my animal companion could be a giant bee, that I ride into combat, grab a lance and some mounted combat feats and let the red wall jokes flow. But a little fairy thing that's small really doesn't melee combat. So I kept looking. Found the Dragonfire Adept in Dragon Magic. That's fun. It's like a breath weapon warlock, its whole deal is breath weapons. Cool, I'm not stuck in melee that way, and a 10-inch tall fairy spewing elemental fury across the battlefield is just hilarious. I've got a plan. It gets worse. Dragonfire Adepts get a special ability at first level. You count as a dragon for any feats that require that as a prerequisite. Cue me diving for the feats that make your breath weapon do strange things. Now I get gas clouds, walls, party buffs, all kinds of hilarious shit. Oh wait. Awaken frightful presence. So naturally big. Enough dragons get the whole fear aura thing, big dragon you better be scared. Well, if you are a smaller dragon and want that fear aura now instead of later, you can take a feat to turn it on. You've gotta be a dragon to take the feat. Well, thanks to Dragonfire Adept I count as a dragon for feats. So now, I'm a 10-inch tall, brightly colored flower fairy, who flies around spewing elemental fury across the battlefield, and when I fly overhead it inspires terror in my enemies. Like Maker will save, fear. My DM actually spit out a little bit of his drink when I sprang the idea on him. This is gonna be hilarious. The only thing left to figure out is personality. I can't decide if I should stick with the childlike innocence thing they do racially, or make it an abrasive jerk to really drive home the ridiculousness. Back off, you miserable gobshite. Fire breathe coming from a tiny flower man is pretty funny. On the other hand, scolding the goblin warband for being naughty before melting them with a cloud of acid is also really funny.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I figured out how to make a good alignment lich. And, I have an orc that is so stupid, and so awful at stuff, that he accidentally became a Buddhist, and is kinda good at it, but like, in a very frustrating way to the other monks. Also, don't ask why there are Buddhists. It just kinda happened. Anyway, he insists most things are illusions.
Wingardium Leviosa.
For them to launch themselves at / onto the dragon. A few of us died in the battle, luckily still lived BC of saving rolls, but we wouldn't have won without our goblin army. Early on in our quests, my party and I came across a goblin cave. We were severely outnumbered, but we could have killed them all, it just would have taken forever and someone may have died. So to make this encounter more efficient, our cleric decided to use his floating and glowing spell at the same time. Using a booming voice, the cleric convinced the goblins that he was a god. The goblins believed him, and decided to form a cult for him. We enslaved them right after, and so from there on the rest of the campaign. We had a small goblin army follow us for the rest of the campaign. A lot of times we just had them back at our house doing hard labor to make us money. Eventually, at the end of the campaign, we had to defeat a dragon's castle. We were severely outpowered. While the 5 of us in the party were trying out best to fight off the dragon, the goblins were using catapults we bought.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I had a female Aarakocra paladin who went insane. I was using a homebrew Oath of the Old Ones. She had a burlap sack that contained a portal to the far realms, known as her Bag of Horrors. She once seduced a dwarf in a tavern, only to crush his skull with a hammer mid-coitus and stuff him into the sack to please her master, Clethnisant. Yes, that was its name. Pronounced Carlisle.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Is it odd that I bought several D&D books but don't play? I would love to, but don't think I have the time in my busy life. I play Gloomhaven occasionally with some friends, but D&D just seems like a whole other level.
Wingardium Leviosa.
It can be a touch overwhelming at first, but there's nowhere near as much bloat and maths involved in 5th edition as in the previous editions. It flows very naturally, and the amount of dice roll plus add shitloads of modifiers then divide by your grandmother's age halved can be kept very low indeed. I'd heartily recommend giving it a go, even if it's just the occasional one-shot.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Made the cult leader jump into a fiery hole to his death without a fight. We had just played a one-shot that consisted of 2 groups run by 2 DMs because the group was too big. The DMs ran a group each and had written the campaign together, and they converged in the end. They worked out perfect timing for running the session and moving us along at the right times. Right at the end, about 3 hours in, we found the group of cult people trying to bring a demon into this world. The floor is cracking and fire is rising up from hell. We are about to have a huge battle. Me, a bard, decided to cast minor illusion or prestidigitation or something into the hole. I said I wanted to mimic a demon-like voice to tell the cultists to jump into the hole to be one with the demon. DM told me to roll performance and deception. Easy peasy, I think. As a bard I have like +7 on charisma. Rolled a double nat 20 and watched the color drain from the poor guy's face as he
Wingardium Leviosa.
was a bard in a one-shot. Used vicious mockery on the final boss, a gibbering mouther. Will all these flailing limbs and spastic mouths, are you a gibbering mouther or an Italian wedding? I said to my very Italian DM. His jaw dropped and I rolled a 19. Then he had the boss take 3 opportunity attacks to one-shot my bard. Worth it.
Wingardium Leviosa.
The big bad was looking rough, but we were worse. Half the party had booked it, and the big bad put me, the paladin, back down every time the healer brought me up. The healer uses his last spell to put me on my feet, one final time. The big bad takes 3 swings at me. The first misses. The second puts me in the single digits. The third misses. I get one more attack before he kills us both, and we all know it. Best crit of my career.
Wingardium Leviosa.
My brother's story, me as a first-time DM. The party had fought and killed an owlbear earlier in the night, and my brother's bonkers dwarf fighter decided that he was going to cut off its arm and use it as an improvised club. Now, though, they were infiltrating a castle that was absolutely crawling with skeletons. They were crossing a rope bridge when down below in a courtyard they spy a skeletal horse. My brother decides that now is his time. He tells me he wants to jump from the bridge and smash the thing with his owlbear arm. Awesome, I think. I tell him to roll acrobatics. He fails and just falls straight off the bridge, but didn't fail too bad, so I let him roll to throw the arm. Nat 20. He rolls a ton of damage, killing the thing in one go. So, I laugh and narrate how as he drops like a bird learning to fly, the arm tumbles end over end, hooks behind the skeleton horses.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Skull and crashes through the whole thing like a bowling ball, scattering bones everywhere. He took D6 damage from the fall, but was very proud of himself.
Wingardium Leviosa.
In a game I'm DMing, my older brother is playing a fighter named Mugumo that managed to get his hands on a Vorpal sword scythe, and then managed to accidentally get stuck with a cursed dagger inhabited by a female spirit that would constantly promise him power if he would just feed the spirit blood. She would keep interrupting him trying to use his scythe since the poor guy couldn't make a wisdom save. Eventually he decided he was tempted enough by her offers, plus the taste of help she was offering, that he told me he wanted to find a bar in a bad part of town. He makes his way there and flashes some cash, but pretends to go into the alley to pee. Two guys follow him. Just as they come up to him to go through the usual give us all your money spiel, he whips around and stabs the one over and over with the dagger. These dudes were not high sour, so the guy went down hard. The dagger
Wingardium Leviosa.
sucks in every drop of blood from the dude, shriveling him up like a mugger raisin. As the second mugger understandably ran away screaming, my brother's fighters stood and clashed the dagger and scythe together. The spirit took the opportunity to enter a superior vessel and leapt across. And that was how my brother made friends with a power-hungry, bloodthirsty evil spirit through the power of straight-up shanking a dude.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I once killed 1.3 million people by accident. We were chasing down an old PC that we gave to the DM to use since his character didn't mesh well with our party. He decided to make him a cult leader. We chased him down to these death ruins where if you rolled low you lost health or died. He was powering a magic spell to spread the ruins to a town of about 3 million people. Big boss battle, epic fight, all that jazz. Just as he was on the ground and defeated, the spell he was charging was still charging and he was laughing maniacally. So I curb stomped his head in. Well? His spell was a dead man switch. So the ruins, Fred and my character basically committed genocide by accident on a town.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Chose to walk straight in and make noises to wake the townsfolk up. While I was on the roof, fish people with flimsy weapons started to exit their homes to see who these strangers terror. During my time on the roof I decided to sneak down. I however failed my agility check and fell straight through where I was greeted by a female fish person holding her baby. Thinking quickly I rushed the women and held her child hostage at sword point, threatening her to be quiet. After a few minutes of observing the room and analyzing exits, a fishman came rushing in through the front door with a pirate's hat on. Now rewinding a bit, let me fill you in on what happened outside. The fish people gathered in the square to investigate my party. After some brief arm flailing to communicate, our charming captain managed to convince the chief that we were all friendly and meant no harm. The captain gifted the chief. Didn't give no fucks about that silly shit. Fast forward to the night I escaped my cage, stole a knife, and brutally murdered the chief's child and wrote curses on the walls of the home using the child's blood. I waited outside the town while my party discovered the act, and the town erupted in panic, threatening to kill the newcomers for bringing this evil. They chose to flee without causing more harm. On the bright side, it was a beautiful sunny day. And fuck those fish. His pirate hat as a sign of good faith. The chief was incredibly excited and wanted to show his wife that the visitors were friendly and had given him a wonderful new hat. Now jump back to me. I didn't know what was happening outside. As soon as the chief rushed on through the door to see my holding his wife and child hostage, I reacted with a shot from my hand crossbow. I rolled a 20 and shot him square between the eyes with such force that his body was thrown out the door and hat flew off his head. His wife screamed and rushed me. I threw the baby at her, which she caught, and then I leapt out the window only to find myself surrounded. My party then apprehended me and claimed I was a criminal they were hunting. The fish people took all of my weapons and armor, then locked me in a cage. The DM began explaining that the fish people were preparing for a sort of ritual on the beach. I Copy/paste from last time I was asked this question. My first time playing D&D with a few of my friends who were also new. I decided I wanted to be a chaotic evil dark elf rogue with a short sword and hand crossbow. The story started as us being crew to a charming pirate captain and shipwrecking on a mysterious island. Our first battle was against some basic crabs, and my newbie friend who was playing a druid decided mid-fight that he wanted to tell the weather forecast for tomorrow, hoping that the information would somehow sway the crabs to forgive us for killing their children. The DM took a long pause and informed him that tomorrow would be sunny. The crabs did not care. Later in the campaign we found a village with no one in sight, so we decided to investigate. Me, being the sneaky rogue, decided to climb up on one of the flimsy thatch roofs to observe the town. My other comrades,
Wingardium Leviosa.
a hobgoblin army was hung on our trail. We had just rescued about 20 prisoners. We fled into the wilderness. The prisoners were slowing us down. Our band broke for dinner. The DM stayed at the house. We couldn't figure out what to do. There were 3 of us and 20 shackled prisoners, so we decided to give the DM a curveball. When we got back, we pledged our souls to the dark god Asmodeus and proceeded to sacrifice all 20 prisoners in his name, leaving the orc army confused and scared as we ran away.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I'm a monk, so I do awesome shit for breakfast. The funnest was when we were fighting a shitload of Ettercaps, weird spider monsters, over a pit filled with their webs. We'd been in there a couple times and kept having to retreat because we kept going in without a plan. I made a plan. Silk burns. Our main party consisted of close-range fighters, but this weekend some people were out and we had guests, namely a rogue who used a bow and a druid. I had a potion of fire breathe, so my plan was we were just going to set the whole fucking pit on fire and then rain ranged attacks down when the Ettercaps came to put the fire out. My potion of fire breathe gave me a range of like 30 feet or something, which wasn't enough, so I just hung down on a rope to start spitting fire once the Ettercaps emerged. We were starting the fire by throwing torches down and then readying attacks once they emerged.
Wingardium Leviosa.
The other managed to make it to the top and fuck up our druid. The rogue took his turn to damage it in hope of killing it, but wasn't successful. Our fighter, I think, it was a class that wouldn't normally do this when they would have been able to just rock shit up close, somehow managed to set this Ettercap on fire. My turn was next and we were all arguing about positioning, but the music we had playing started to crescendo, so I had to make a move. So I shoved past my teammates and used Flurry of Blows. Flurry of Blows means if you land a hit with your main attack, you can make 2 unarmed attacks as a bonus action. I rolled 3. Fucking nat 20s. The end result was I IP manned this Ettercap in the face several times before launching it back into the pit with a Spartan kick and ended the entire encounter because the entirety of the web-encircled pit went up in flames and killed the rest of the Ettercaps. It also killed a bunch of the people we were there to save, but the most important person was a tiefling and the fire didn't kill him. He hated most of the other people there for political reasons, so we still got paid the same. So the readied actions went well, but when we rolled initiative, I ended up on the low end and the Ettercaps were mostly starting the fight. About half of them went to put out the fires and the other half laid their aim square at me, as their only ranged attacks had me squarely in their sights. They spit webs at me to stick me to the rope, and when my turn came I rolled a nat 20 and flexed right out of them. Of course that was my action, so all I could do after then was climb back up the rope and let the others keep shooting at them while the Ettercaps managed to put the fires out. The druid cast a spell, I don't remember the name of that, summons a globe of fire in like a 15-foot radiance, so that reoccupied the Ettercaps for a round to put out the fires, and one now well-charred Ettercap. 2 Ettercaps started crawling up the wall towards us. One died on the way up and
Wingardium Leviosa.
souls know who is resurrecting them and what alignment their deity has, though. Second time resurrection would pretty consistently fail. Unless they were fanatical enough to suffer that torture to play you.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Depends entirely on the edition they were playing. There are plenty of editions where resurrection has no failure chance and can't be refused by the target. Rereading 5e spells. There are resurrection spells that don't require the target to be willing as well. So yeah, works in any edition.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I was playing a level 2 wizard at a convention, 5e, so just one shots. Teamed up with a couple of people, get to the end of the game. Veg is on a boat, henchmen on the dock, sailors being forced to get the boat ready for taking off. Supposed to be on a strict time limit, until the beg escapes. Me, I can do something, depending on how much HP those sailors have. Paladin, don't kill them, they aren't evil. Me, casts sleep. DM, alright, what is the save? Me, no save, just affects a certain HP of people for 1 minute. Or until they are woken up. DM? And that is how things went from a hectic race against time to a casual stroll. Still had another sleep ready just in case.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Those scant turns. Let alone do that much damage. My GM told me that my ratfolk ending up alone with the boss was also randomized, the mechanic. As if his oh god, Joro, ratfolk name, I'm sorry wasn't obvious enough, haha. It is my proudest achievement in storytelling and tabletop RPG gaming. This is why I find point buy, and min-maxing defeating of the experience. This is the shit I will remember. The, formerly, 11 strength ratfolk fighter who did literally level 1 barbarian level damage until level fucking 8. Now at level 15 practically soloed the final boss. Pretty much earned his status by looking at fate and saying fuck you. He is a literal inspiration to me in real life because of how he defied all odds and shortcomings, with sheer tenacity and stubbornness bordering on mere thick-headedness. Not Crete. I do presumably only a little damage as the ratfolk can tell. It appears the boss has some sort of damage reduction. The boss swings their flaming scimitar against him, and misses. I roll again. He attacks the boss again, making a called shot against the boss's arm. I roll. It's a 20. I roll to confirm. It's a 17. It confirms. The boss's dex is hampered. Having enough of the ratfolk, the boss casts a save or die spell. The ratfolk can't defy this spell however, but makes his save. Defiant enough I suppose. But I'm down to 17 hit points. One more hit from either that scimitar or a spell and I'm dead. With the party nowhere in sight I attack again, scoring more hits, somehow, as I needed to roll roughly 16 or more to hit. By now the ratfolk had done well over 200 damage to the final boss, and cleared almost 3/4 of their health, told after, we are not aware of. We didn't even have health potions going in, the ratfolk has literally 1/3 of his HP left. So I went all in, as did he. He knew he was going to die, and I accepted it. It was pretty zen. Bear in mind up to this point the ratfolk's rolls had been below average the entire campaign. I could literally hand calculate every roll I made and the number would be below average. I alone roll initiative. We go first. I roll to attack. It's a 19, in my crit range. I roll to confirm. An 18. It's enough, with like a plus 30 something modifier. Glaives do 3x crit damage. I call it a fluke, but it's a good start. Boss opens up with a prismatic spray, where 7 different bolts with different effects can affect you. Somehow the ratfolk managed to outright deflect the attack entirely, having spent so long defying magic he could actively defend against it. I attack again. I hit, but do strike from 10 feet out. His attack of opportunity range became hilarious and incredible at locking swathes of enemies if the DM decided they were dumb enough to charge him. From shitlord fighter to a legendary dragoon-looking motherfucker that could cut swathes of soldiers down at a moment's notice with incredible tanking abilities. He'd come far. So we finally enter the stronghold of the final boss. And due to a magical effect the party becomes split up. Guess who gets sent, alone, to the final boss of a 6-book campaign that spanned 2 years of our real lives? I was at a loss. No way I was surviving. Even for as far as the rat folk came, there was no way he could take on the final boss. It was a high-leveled spellcaster. His chances of nullifying their magics was slim and their AC left almost no chance of striking them without the few buffs our wizard could provide. A significantly more balanced version of Mythic powers. Original Mythic is stupidly gamey and OP, just to compensate. But somehow we all survived and pulled through every encounter. Over time the Ratfolk fighter became stronger. At 8th level starting from level 1, he finally unlocked enough strength to use power attack, a literal staple ability to any fighter. Stronger he grew, alongside his distaste for magic. He was always affected by some debilitating effect, whether it was a stun, laugh, or some other obnoxious mood-killing effect. He grew so fed up with magical effects on him, from sheer stubbornness and frustration he slowly started developing a strong magical resistance. Frustrated with being grabbed, due to his small size, he eventually bought a full set of fully plated enchanted armor that would deploy spines on command. His usage of a glaive enabled him to. My character was essentially gymped from the start of an extraordinarily long Pathfinder campaign, known as Kingmaker. Ratfolk fighter with subpar rolled stats, so it was a real winning combination. Add in the fact we had an undersized party and no dedicated healer, it was a miracle how our party progressed and completed the whole campaign. It should also be noted my group builds characters as characters, not min-maxing crap, so I was at an even greater disadvantage. Our DM told us later on after the campaign he was pulling no punches and only changed a single encounter in Chapter 4 that he thought was blatantly out of place and imbalances. But anyways, this character on top of mediocre stats, had consistently bad rolls. Any damage I did do was weak to begin with due to few flat modifiers, hurt even more by rolling consistently low for damage. It was so bad our DM gave our party
Wingardium Leviosa.
enemy HP during sessions, in the span of barely a few turns with no buffs and maybe 57 horsepower remaining at the start of the encounter. The party finally figures out the mechanism, and they arrive alongside me just as the boss was preparing a maze spell that could lock away my character in another reality for an indeterminate amount of time, because they were that done with him. Though he did not manage to strike a killing blow on the boss, we stared death straight in the eye in the worst possible situation, and survived, came out victorious in the conflict. The luck of the dice was on my side that night, in a string of successes I had not seen in such magnitude since the start of the campaign. The weakest character of the party became the strongest, toughest fighter of them all, and in retrospect, was the only party member who could have faced the final boss alone and survived.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Casting. And I kid you the fuck not, I did not fail a single saving throw. Hold person, fear, even eye bite, none of them landed. I slaughtered 2 of the 3 on my own, and when the bard managed to trap the 3rd from escaping, I beat the last one to death with my bare hands, after we extracted some useful information from her, of course. I just wanted to leave them be, but they had to attack us. Too bad my skull was too thick for them. We were playing through a dungeon, and it was heavily telegraphed to us that we were about to have to deal with, and potentially fight, an entire coven of hags. We were a fairly decent level at this point, but my barbarian, who was a goblin, was very superstitious about the whole thing. Normally she would relish the chance for a fight, but hags. No way, nah, no dice. So the time comes, and the hags appear, and of course things go south. Within 2 rounds of combat, the fighter was feared, the bard was paralyzed, and our cleric was stunned, leaving me and the druid to fend off 3 hags by ourselves. My barbarian got pissed. All she wanted to do was leave these hags alone, and they had to go out of their way to ruin her life anyways. She absolutely went to town on them. Eventually, they start turning their focus on her, and my barbarian becomes the focal point of all there.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Awesome, yeah. Something like that. So. Long story short, the fucking half-orc of the party made some crazy-ass rolls, faked a position in a council, and got himself into some promises he couldn't keep during his facade. One in particular was a blood pact with the Dragonborns and their group. Having the highest stealth, I was naturally roped into stealing the blood pact scroll from the dragon's lair. Between a good natural bonus and some magic help, I net a +26 to my stealth roll. Natural 1, of course. 13d8 later, I was knocked out, falling from the window 80 up.
Wingardium Leviosa.
One of my friends, playing a cleric. Insane strength score. Long story short, he picked up a 10-foot tall wooden beam. Also, another friend was kidnapped. He ended up swallowing his gag and choking to death.
Wingardium Leviosa.
One of my friends, playing a cleric. Insane strength score. Long story short, he picked up a 10-foot tall wooden beam. On D&D 3.0, the 2 degrees level cleric spells Bull's Strength and Bear's Endurance gave +4 SDR/+4 con as usual, but had a duration of 1 hour/level instead of 1 minute/level as corrected in 3.5. Many lawbreakers came to fear the extreme violent justice dispensed by Askov, the lawful evil cleric.
Hey guys, this is the Rogue YouTuber here. I recently had a big change in my life. I had a baby daughter. Here she is. If you could do me a favor and remember to hit the subscribe button and bang the bell, I'm hoping to really create a YouTube channel that really gets people excited and brings people the best, most interesting content collated from across the internet. I'm saving up to save my little girl to Carnegie Mellon Computer Science Department. So please remember to like and subscribe. See you next time.